I so appreciate your time, and I absolutely want to make this worth your while this evening. Um, in my quest to really share with you a way of eating that is not just effective, but also something that you can do to fit any budget. And now, of course, this is so important. I mean, it's always been important. In recent years, more important, but I think in 2026 now it's sort of gone up a level again, hasn't it? And this is something that certainly in my work, I'm going to keep focusing on because a way of eating, if we're going to do something, especially for weight loss, whatever we do to lose weight, we have to be able to keep doing in order to keep it off, right? So having a plan that's sustainable, that works, is only going to work if it also fits our budget. So it's so important that that key element can be covered, and I absolutely believe it can, and that's what I want to share with you this evening. I'm going to start by giving you an overview of low carb, especially if you're new to this way of eating. I'm going to talk about exactly what it looks like, why it works, and how to make it really easy so that we're all on the same page as to what low carb looks like in practice. But then I want to share with you my specific strategies on how you can maximize nutrition so you're getting the absolute best bang for your buck. Now, what I'm going to tell you might be different from what you've heard before. In fact, I hope that it is. And I might share some things in an angle that is a bit different than maybe even what you might expect from a nutritionist. But that's why you're here, right? You're here to hear a different point of view. And that's my goal. I just want to give you a different perspective to think about this so that as we move forward, you've just got a different angle to come to so that if you've got a certain amount to spend, you are going to get the best nutrition possible for that dollar. And at the later half of this presentation, I want to give you a whole lot of food ideas, just showing you examples of what you can get, how we make it cost effective, including my famous chicken recipe that I created for a client who was absolutely, he had no money at all and needed the cheapest thing possible. So I created this recipe for him that worked out to $1.50 a serve, and it worked so well for his weight loss. So I'm going to share that with you near the end. But for those of you who don't know me, just a couple of key points so you know where I'm coming from. This lifestyle, this low carb way of eating is something that I've been following for 25 years now. And it's how I've maintained my own 30-kilo weight loss. I didn't know about low carb when I lost weight in my early 20s. I was living overseas and had just time to focus on my own self-care. It was brilliant. So I lost 30 kilos in a year, which was awesome, but I couldn't keep it off because I didn't know anything about nutrition. So I came back to New Zealand, went and saw a nutritionist because I was gaining weight and I didn't know why because I thought, well, I'm doing everything right. But I wasn't. So she taught me about low carb. It absolutely made sense to me, which is why I made that change all those years ago. And I've been doing it ever since. Then I decided that I loved it so much, I wanted to have a career change and do this for my career. So I went back to uni and I've been a weight loss coach now for 14 years. So this way of eating is not just something that I coach. I've lived it. I've gone through all these phases of being a young mum, now being a mum to teenagers, going through perimenopause. I'm going through it. And this way of eating sustains. It's incredibly powerful. In addition to low carb, I help people with keto. Emotional eating is a big side, this whole mindset and food journey. IBS is something I help people with as well, how we maximize gut health. And my favorite topic, which is sugar addiction. That was a big part of my journey. So those are all the kind of things that I do. But I think really from the perspective of what we're talking about tonight, I have to live this lifestyle on a budget as well. I've got two hungry teenagers who don't eat this way, but I manage to adjust the meals quite easily, and I'll talk about that, and I'm an Aucklander with a high mortgage. Just saying. So the pressure is on, and I have to make this way of eating work. So I'm right in the trenches with you guys. That's for sure. Okay. So let's talk about this way of eating and just what it looks like and why it is so effective. So there are many, many benefits that come from following the low carb way of eating. Weight loss, of course, is a big one, a big motivation of why people want to eat this way because we're eating less energy foods in the form of carbohydrate, which means our body's more likely to take the energy from our fat cells. That's the goal. So low carb is very effective at doing that. It works so well because it's really good at balancing our blood sugars. It keeps your blood sugars stable, your insulin stable, and that's how our body is able to lose fat really well. It's just real food. That's all it is. Very, very simple. And it can be absolutely budget friendly. Low carb can be as simple or as fancy pants as you want it to be. And after all these years, I'm a big fan of the simple. The hugest benefit, though, about low carb, why it is just so powerful, is that it really helps target inflammation. We're getting rid of a whole lot of processed, carby, insulin spiking, crappy food, if I'm being honest, and snacks and junk. And one of the most powerful and quick effects from this is that it's really good at reducing inflammation. So, this is why it's just so, so powerful. And those results can happen quite quickly. I've had clients who have had skin issues disappear, gut problems, joint pain. It's so much more than just weight loss. And that's what makes me so excited to share this way of eating with as many people as I can. Now, your definition of low carb might be different from mine. So, just to clarify, when I talk about low carb, it's not extreme ketogenic, you're not having any carbs at all. We're looking at under 50 grams per day, okay, in total. So, what the meals look like, we make sure meals have a really good amount of protein, we add in healthy fats. Veggies are unlimited except the higher starch veg that you can see here. And then the great thing about living in these times is that there are a lot of low carb substitutes available now, like low carb bread and low carb wraps. You might be familiar with some of these products. And this just makes it very easy. Everything that I eat, pretty much everything, is just available at the supermarket. So we're so lucky now that food manufacturers are making more products, and they're making them because people are buying them because it works. So it really is very easy to do all of your shopping at the supermarket. Maybe there might be a couple of extra products like protein powder that we can get online. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But for the most part, this is just real simple food. And just as a very simple overview, this is what your plate looks like when you're following a low carb plan. You've got your nice portion of protein. That might be chicken, meat, seafood, vegetarian sauce, tofu, tempeh. You've got your portions of healthy fats, which could be avocado, cheese, butter, olive oil. So you're adding healthy fats to the meal, which really keeps you full. You can have as many veggies as you like, except potato and kumbara and pumpkin. And these are just some examples of some of the meals that I've just pulled off our Facebook group of what my members eat. So as you can see, look, it's all very simple, and we're just following this template here as often as possible with real food. And then adding in some of those substitutes, perhaps if we want to, like a low carb wrap to make a pizza or some bread. Now, as well as all the health benefits that I've already outlined, there are some really powerful financial benefits as well that can come when you eat this way. The biggest is that you're not as hungry, and that is a massive win. One thing that I try and encourage everyone to lean towards is eating good meals and then zipping it and lasting as long as you can before you eat again and not snacking. Think of how much money we probably spend on snacks. This whole thing about you have to snack. It feels like it became really, really powerful back in the 70s and 80s when the whole message of, oh, we need to eat low fat, became mainstream. Because when you don't eat fat, what happens is you feel hungrier. And when you're hungrier, you want a snack. And luckily, all these food manufacturers have stepped up and said, hey, well, that's okay if you're hungry. We'll make you some low fat muesli bars and you can have some fruit. And it feels like there's just this whole thing now of snacking, which is a whole expense that actually you don't need, which doesn't mean you can't have snacks on low carb. There are some very yummy ones, but certainly I find that when you get your blood sugars balanced and you calm your whole system down and your insulin is stable, You're off this bandwagon of needing to eat all the time. So, this means you're not going to need to eat as much because you're actually fueling yourself properly with protein and fat that are going to keep you fuller for longer. So, this is a really key benefit of low carb. We're hopefully going to cut out those snacks, and that means that that's going to be a great saving. Fats are a very affordable way to add flavor to meals, and they keep you full. And like I've said, there are a variety of products available now, many that cost the same. Like you can get low carb cereal now. That never used to be available, but the big companies like Vogel's and Hubbard's, they have low carb cereal, costs the same as their normal muesli. We've got the low carb wraps. They're pretty much the same. So it's really not so difficult now to be able to bring in some of these options and achieve your weight loss goals without spending any more. In fact, because you'll be more organized and planned, you're going to spend less because you won't be doing those random, oh, heck, I forgot my lunch, and then end up at some cafe spending 20 bucks. But, the other great thing about low carb, as well as the fact that it works so well, is that it's delicious. And this is just a quote from one of the ladies who did my program. She's eating yummy fats, feeling good, her body's responding, and she's lost weight. It's a massive win. Okay. Now, this is the part where I'm going to say something which you might not be expecting, but what I want you to think about here is not so much where we're at now. It's more about where things could be going in the future. Now, I am not a dooms believer, panicking, reading all the negative press. I try very hard not to do that because as an emotional eater, one of the things that I find really important is to keep working on my mindset, always keep channeled in a positive direction. That's really important. However, of course, we live in this world. I hear what's going on, and I hear a lot of talk, as I'm sure you have as well, about food security. What's coming around the corner? No one knows. It's uncertain times. And one of the things you have probably heard about is there might be a shortage. Now, who knows if that's going to happen? Let's hope not. But it's really had me thinking about if there are shortages, how do we cope with this in the best way possible from a nutrition perspective? Okay. Now, one of the messages that I keep hearing in the media, which, hey, I love the idea of it, is we've got to grow our own food. Okay. Wonderful. If you've got a vegetable garden, and you love growing your own food, then I think that's awesome. And look, I would encourage anyone who has the time and inclination to do that, absolutely do it. I'm not saying don't do that, but I want you to think a little bit wider than just eating vegetables. Okay, now vegetables are great, they're great to include with a meal, but if the shizzle really hit the fan and we were facing a bit of a shortage, vegetables are not going to do much to optimize our nutrition in that overall sense. They are great to add fiber to your plate. From a weight loss perspective, they're awesome because they're low in calories, which is fantastic. But if we're talking about fueling our body for optimal health, vegetables alone are not going to save the day. So with my strategies, if you just take one thing away from this presentation tonight, it's what we really need. If times are a bit lean and your budget is incredibly tight and you have to prioritize one thing, especially if you're not that great at growing vegetables, which can be a bit expensive. And again, I'm not dissing vegetables. Please don't get me wrong. Vegetables are wonderful. However, your body needs protein more than it needs vegetables. Okay, because protein has essential amino acids that must be obtained from food. Vegetables have a very, very small amount of protein. It's not very bioavailable, which means your body can't absorb it easily. So I really want people to just start thinking a little bit about this, that if you have a small amount to spend, make sure you are getting some cheap and affordable forms of protein into your shop each week. If you're wanting to maybe plan ahead a little bit and stock up on a few things, I would be recommending to do it with protein. And I'm going to talk a little bit in a bit in another slide on how you can do that. But the reason we need to do that is because protein is so important to protect your muscle. I mean, you've probably heard these messages so often, especially if you're a woman going through menopause. We've got to get protein. We've got to get protein because our body can't get it from food, all of the amino acids. So if you start under eating protein, if you're not getting the protein each day, your body's going to start taking it from your muscle. It'll take it from muscle in times of stress. Yes, it might take some from fat, but it's going to take it from muscle, especially if you're really stressed out and under eating. And that in the long term is disastrous, especially for your metabolism. So we really want to protect muscle at all costs when weight loss is our goal and health. And this means getting your protein. So that's what I want you to think about. Protein also helps keep you full. It is the most satiating micronutrient out of all of the things we could choose from. Your body burns a lot of calories eating protein. It's incredibly essential for your immune system. So if we don't eat protein, our health is going to be at risk. So, this is the message that I am telling to people. Yes, have your veggie garden, great. But if you really want the best nutrition, you are going to need protein. So, if your budget is tight, make sure you are including whatever protein you can afford. And if that means that you're lowering your vegetables, you are not going to be missing out in a major way from being healthy. That's probably the message that I thought most people don't expect. When I say that to people, they'll always say to me, but shouldn't I be prioritizing veggies, my 5+ a day? No, I don't think so. Not if you're on an extremely tight budget and not if fertilizer is running short and vegetables skyrocket in price. You're better off putting that money towards a best quality protein that you can afford. And hopefully, if things do spike, it's not going to be forever, right? Hopefully, this will be temporary. I mean, hopefully, it doesn't happen at all. Might be a bit of a price rise and then it comes down. Wonderful, in which case, carry on as we are, right? But if things do get really tight, make sure you have some protein stored if you can. And the other thing you need are our fats. So these are omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, right? We have to get it from our diet. And you've probably heard this is why fish is so important, those omega-3 fatty acids. The omega-6s are much easier for us to get. You get those from nuts, other types of oils, but what we need is balance. So what happens is it's quite easy to get omega-6s, but we want a balance of omega-6 and omega-3. So that's why there's always a lot of emphasis to increase omega-3 so that it's more balanced. And we have to do that through diet. That's fish, that's things like chia seeds, flax seeds are great too. So we have to eat these. Our body can't make them. The other reason fat is so helpful, especially when you're on a budget, is that again, fat keeps you full. I know we think that we have to sort of bulk up our meal and eat a whole lot, and this is where vegetables can come in, especially on low carb. It's nice to have that big salad and eat, 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 eat. Your stomach enjoys that feeling of being full, but in all honesty, what actually sends that signal to your brain that says that you're full is fat. So there are people who will really limit themselves, especially if they don't tolerate vegetables. They're just eating meat with some portions of fat, and they are perfectly satiated between meals. So I know this is, again, it's a bit of an adjustment from how we normally eat or how we think we have to eat, but it is absolutely doable to rely on your healthy fats with protein as a bit of an emergency option so that you're staying full and you're staying healthy. Fats slow your digestion down, so they keep food in your stomach longer. A little bit like a GLP-1 type thing. You're not going to be as hungry because you're satiated between meals, and they keep your blood sugars very stable. And when people first come to see me, this is the biggest change that they really experience because they're a bit worried about adding in fats. But when you feel how good it feels, you soon realize that this is what often is missing, especially from diets where you're looking at calories in, calories out, and you're doing a calorie deficit because that's where you tend to cut the fat out. But you're hungry. You're hungry all the time. It's not pleasant. It's stressful, very difficult to do in the long term. Your body does not like to be hungry. So we need to be really maximizing our nutrition here to say, how do I get the best bang for my buck so that my body is getting what it needs. I'm staying full and I'm not on this horrible hunger pattern. Okay, so that's where we need our protein and our fats. That's what I want you to really prioritize. And like I said, yes, vegetables are great, especially if they're grown in soil that has good nutrients. But meat and chicken and seafood and our animal products, dairy products as well, are incredibly nutritious too. So you are not going to be missing out. If you can't buy as many veggies, if things change or your budget's really tight, then don't feel like you're going to be suffering from some nutrition deficiency or you're going to be getting sick. As long as you can keep getting protein, that's going to go a really long way towards helping you get a lot of great vitamins and minerals into your system. Okay. And again, I'm not saying don't eat veggies. It's just you're not going to be lacking when you eat a nice range of animal products as well. Okay, so those are my first two suggestions. Now, I want to give another suggestion to you on how to do your planning. And of course, I'm sure you've heard that if you want to stick to a budget and you want to make sure that your budget stretches far enough, you've got to have a plan. Yep, that makes sense. And I would suggest exactly the same thing, sitting down and writing your meals for a week. But I wanted to share a little bit of a tweak on that, which is what I do, that's really, really helpful because it means that most of the time I'm sticking to some very basic, cost-effective meals. And I give two meals in the week, if we can afford it, that might be a little bit more flexible, where I might spend a little bit more. And that could be a barbecue where we up our spend on meat a little bit. If you know how I work, I have a 5 and 2 strategy for weight loss as well, which is very effective, which is where we follow our low carb plan for 5 days and then we choose 2 days to do something different. And I thought, the same strategy can apply really well to our budgeting. Have a nice little simple array of meals that work, that are easy, that are really cost effective. Then hopefully there'll be room for some slightly more extravagant meals so that you don't feel like it's always just the simple stuff. And I find this works really well for us. Some weeks we just stick with the simple stuff because it's just that's how the week goes. But I find in the weekend, if I can, I like just having a little bit more budget towards something a little bit more exciting, especially for the family. If I'm being honest, for me, it doesn't really bother me as much, but my family, clearly they like being a bit more extravagant than I do. But look, here are some really simple examples of what we eat as these simple $20 to $25 meals. So as I said, I have two teenagers. One is very sporty, so there's a lot of sort of food needed, and I just make it adapt. So we might do a roast chicken once a week. I'll do potatoes for the kids or some chips or rice. My husband's half Japanese, so we have rice a lot. That's very important for him. And I just eat the meat and maybe a bit of veg. Easy. Tacos. I get one of those taco kits, especially when they're on special for $6. Cook up mince. They have their tacos on the shells and the wraps. I just eat mine on some lettuce and put a bit of sour cream on the top and some salsa. So that works really well. Burgers. I'll get normal meat patties for everyone else, and then I just have a little bag of the lower carb frozen meat patties, and I'll do one of those for me. So we're all eating the same food. I'm just bringing mine in and making it low carb in a way that really works. If I wanted that like a bread bun sensation, I would use a Jerry's low carb bun. Um, that's available, but to be honest, normally I just make the inside of the burger and put it on a plate. Lettuce, meat patty, cheese, bit of mayo, yum, all of the yummy stuff. I just don't eat the bread. We'll do pizzas one night. So the family might use low carb wraps or normal pizza bases just with a bit of simple meat and cheese on the top. I'll do the same thing, but I'll put my pizza on a low carb wrap. Beef schnitzel, that's another very popular meal in this house. Well, is it? I wouldn't actually, that's a lie. I wouldn't say it's popular, but they eat it. They eat it because it's crunchy. Now, if we're doing beef schnitzel, I won't eat the crumb, but then when I take it off, it doesn't taste very nice. So if I'm being totally honest, if we're doing beef schnitzel, I'll normally just quickly cook up a couple of eggs and have that with salad. But if I like beef schnitzel, I wouldn't stress out about a tiny bit of crumb on the outside. It's not focusing on the minute details. It's just having a way of eating that's easy, that works, right? But roasted chicken is very easy and often quite cheap. So I'll just do a whole lot of chicken thighs or chicken drumsticks when they're on special, stock up, easy meals. And sausages. You can get low carb sausages. So I will just do normal sausages for the fam, and I might have a little stash of frozen low carb sausages, so I'll cook those. So you see, it's not about extravagance. It's just about normal, very simple meals that can be done at a good price. And in terms of making them low carb, you can do it without really trying. It's very easy to just make a couple of adjustments so that you're eating similar things to the family and you're able to lose weight. Okay, now, as I've mentioned, look, frozen, you may be aware of this tip, but it really, really does help. When you price out fresh chicken to frozen, the frozen meats are really, really cost effective. So certainly recommend, if you, especially if you've got some freezer space, getting in now, getting some chickens. They're always so good for bulk meals. Have your veggies, frozen veg, helpful to add to meals, a lot more cost effective. And when studies have done, they've got good nutrition in them too because they're frozen really quickly after being picked. So, again, a nice option just to bulk up meals a bit. And get frozen meats where you can. Our local Pack and Save has some yummy frozen salmon. So, as we know, the price of fresh salmon is exorbitant. So, I'll sometimes get those frozen salmons. That could be one of those treat meals that I might do once a week. And it's just about making the most of these kind of options for those cheaper meals so that we can really stick to our budget but still get good nutrition. And the last tip is, make the most of online options that is available in low carb as well that brings the price down. So a really good clearance website, that reduced to clear online .co.nz. I don't know if you're aware of that, but sometimes they have some good protein products. I had a look at it today. They had some tins of tuna that were basically half price from what the supermarket would charge. They had some protein bars. So, you can keep your eye out for those type of websites to see if you can get a good discount. The other website that I really like is Paddock to Pantry. They often have some quite good specials on meat. So that's another option that you could check out. They had some really delicious options that I saw today that were quite reasonable for chicken thighs, boneless chicken thighs. So definitely worth checking out. And we also have some nice subscription options that bring the price down. So my favorite low carb bread is the Jerry's low carb bread. It's great. And it's about $8.99 if you get it on subscription. And I mean, that has 14 bits of bread in it, 12 to 14. So that's 14 breakfasts. So really, yes, it might be more pricey than normal bread, but it's filling, it's high in protein. A little bit goes a long way. Meat box is a good option for meat. And when it comes to protein powder, that's such a competitive price, their product. There are so many options. So just shop around, look for the cheapest price. Right now, NZ Protein have got value whey at $39 a kilo, which is crazy cheap. They've got, I think, a vanilla and a chocolate flavor. So that's a brilliant thing to stock up on for that price. That's $1 for a serve of protein, which is brilliant. Okay, so I've sort of given you these strategies where we're going to say, let's get the protein, let's get some fats, have them available, keep us full, best bang for our buck. Let me just outline which ones I recommend and just giving you a bit of an idea as to cost and how that works, how much protein you're getting. So one of the best options is, in terms of health as well, as sardines. I've got a little stash of cans of sardines. If I'm being 100% honest, I haven't eaten them yet. My husband likes them. Anyway, I actually do like them, but they kind of remind me of cat food. But anyway, look, I've got some flavored ones. They are bang per buck, very, very nutritious, and you're getting a lot of calcium in sardines, good sources of fat. So that is a nice thing to stock up on. About what, $2.40-ish per serve, and you're getting 15 to 20 grams of protein. Tuna is also fantastic, a really good source of protein. Now, you might be thinking mercury. I know sometimes people are worried about that. Sardines are actually normally have one of the lowest levels of mercury, and tuna in New Zealand, a lot of it is skipjack. tuna, which has the lowest levels. I mean, if you're concerned about it, I'm not saying you have to eat it every day, don't get me wrong, but it is a really good thing to have into your weekly plan because it is so cost effective and you get a lot of bang for your buck. Eggs are brilliant, even though they've gone up in price, per gram, they're one of the healthiest foods that you can get. 65 to 70 cents for an egg, two or three eggs, you've got a meal. So really so much nutrition in an egg. Mince, I know mince is no way near as cheap as it used to be, but per serve, if a kilo of mince, roughly 25 to $27, but if that's giving you 8 serves, that's still pretty good value for how much nutrition you're getting. And you're getting 28 grams of protein per serve. So I would still put it in there. That's the most expensive out of all of these. But in terms of nutrient density, you're still getting a lot of good nutrition. Of course, we've got our frozen chicken, $14, for 100-gram serve, you've got 25 grams of protein. These kind of things, your frozen chicken thighs, really cost effective. And protein powder. So I said there was a value one that was $39. You can get it. I had a quick look around today that any price between $39 up to $54 you can get for whey protein. There are other proteins that are cheaper. Pea protein, you can get all sorts of protein powder now, and that is very cost effective for a quick high protein meal. Even our protein yogurt, the Kalo yogurt, I love that. I actually had that for dinner tonight with a bit of protein powder mixed in, banana protein powder, yum. So per serve, you're getting 15 grams of protein and you're getting 5 serves in this tub for $8.50. So again, these are just some maybe outside of the square options that you wouldn't maybe think about as being effective sources of protein, but they really can be. So it's things that you can add in for a quick lunch, things, especially if you don't love meat. You could have a meal with protein yogurt. You could do your protein powders and get a bit more stretch for your budget by having some of these alternative sources. And fats. Fats work out extremely cheap per serve. Butter, 30 cents a serve. And this is what keeps you full. Coconut oil, 23 cents for a tablespoon. Lovely olive oil. And I know that's gone up in price. So I was looking on the supermarket websites. Some olive oil is closer to $30. There's some that's a bit cheaper. So I average it out at about $25. That's still just under 40 cents for a tablespoon. And that's for a lovely high quality olive oil. So per serve, really cost effective. Cheese, 35 cents a serve. Mayo, peanut butter. Look, there's a range of options here. You may not like to eat peanut butter, but there's choices. And I think that's the key thing I want you to take away from this. You can be full without spending much money at all if you need to, and particularly if you're on a very tight budget. And that's why I recommend, just keep it simple. 2 beautiful eggs scrambled on a piece of low carb toast, under $3. I'd hate to think how much we'd pay at a cafe, but it would probably be a bit more than that. Probably more like $15 these days, plus a coffee. Good luck getting any change out of $20, right? Low carb cereal with the protein yogurt, $2.70. Yummy, filling. That is going to keep you full for hours, just as eggs do. Something like your ham and egg cups, simple things like this, real food, very cost effective. And a protein shake. Protein powder, as I've said, can be very, very cost effective. So you could have that as a meal with some almond milk or some normal milk. Add a couple of berries, some cream or some peanut butter for the fats, chia seeds, and that's going to keep you full and give you so much good nutrition. Lunch. Here are some really simple options. Low carb pizza with your mixed meat, cheese, low carb wraps. The wraps are brilliant. You can use them as a quesadilla. So easy. I love quesadilla. That's one of my favorite things, I have to say. Leftovers, things like chicken drumsticks with salad and a bit of mayo. Any sort of leftover chicken's really easy, right? For a meal, put that in a wrap. So keep it simple. And if you just have some nice simple options like these instead of buying your lunch, being organized, having that plan, simple meals with leftovers that you can take, so cost effective. And look, meals can be incredibly simple too. These are kind of the recipes that I have in my program, things like meatballs, Spicy pork stir fry. I actually often use some of that Taylor Farm salads if I don't even have time to buy the veggies. That can be one bag of that I can use for 4 serves. Just add some mince and a bit of sriracha sauce. Done. Quick. This is one of my recipes, a chicken, bacon, and veggie bake. That works out to $4.20 per serve. So you're getting some really good nutrition here um, at a really good price. And here's my famous weight loss meal for $1.50 per serve, which was a soup. And as I mentioned, this particular person had no money at all, very on such a tight budget. So I made up this recipe for him, a creamy chicken and veggie soup. He loved it and would eat it for weeks on end as either lunch or dinner. And it worked out to $1.50 per serve, and it worked brilliantly. He lost weight, and what was really good was he was preserving muscle mass because I could see that on my scale. So he wasn't burning muscle. Because he was getting enough calories with the fat, with the protein, and he did great. So it's things like this, just by having some ideas, cooking it in advance, making the most of our cheapest proteins can really help you get something that's going to be a really nice addition to stretch your budget out further. Okay. So, in summary, what we eat, of course, it matters. We're eating 4 or 5 times a day. Getting it right is so important, particularly when weight loss is your goal. And it does not have to be expensive. If you have a plan, you have some knowledge, and you know what to make as your top priority, right? And it is so important because when you are able to lose weight and reduce inflammation, eat more real food, this is the key cornerstone that impacts your health so powerfully. And as we know, nobody ever wants to have ill health, but I think particularly at a time when our health system is so stretched, we want to do everything we can to stay as healthy as possible. And this is where our protein and fats come in, having good balanced meals, cutting out excess food is so, so helpful. And I want to finish tonight just also by thinking of something else or mentioning something else that is something I've been talking about with clients, which I think is even more powerful right now in April 2026, in a year that, let's just say, has not exactly gone according to plan. Like, I don't know about you, but when I sat down and made my goals for 2026, yeah, this isn't quite what I had imagined. And as we know, you only have to turn on any social media thing or the Herald, look, anything, and it seems to be chaos, on a daily basis, which is very discombobulating, isn't it? And humans, we don't like uncertainty, especially us emotional eaters, especially food uncertainty. Everyone starts talking about food prices going up. That's very unsettling for us. So, one mindset thing that I would like to leave you with tonight is that in amidst this chaos that's happening around us, which we don't have to play into, but it is still there and people are talking about it, what we need to focus on is controlling what we can. Right? We just can let go of everything else going on. We can't control the price of petrol and everything else, but we can really, really work on each day controlling what we can. And when we do that, it feels good. If we're losing weight, that feels really damn good if our clothes are getting a bit looser. If we're able to stay in control of our eating, if we're putting ourselves first, if we're making health a priority. I've always found with clients that when they're on a really, really good vibe, when they're seeing results, they are so happy and positive. And I feel like right now, that's something that if we can give it to ourselves, it's even more beneficial than maybe it ever has been before. So, if you're watching this and maybe you've been hesitant to take steps towards eating either low carb or any food plan because you keep saying, I just can't afford it. I would just, suggest to you that if you know you've got a goal you want to achieve, if you can start taking action, this is a really, really good time to do so because it's getting back in control when everything else is a bit chaotic, it does really feel good. And I think if we can just that's what I say to myself every morning in business, in my eating. I just keep coming back to what can I do today? How can I show up today? How can I tick my boxes? Because that's all I can control. And I just let go of the rest and try really hard not to look at social media. Anyway, that's just a little thought that I wanted to share. It's come up a lot in client sessions, and I think it's just more important now than ever.